Okay, so welcome back to the tutorials. At the end of the last episode, I said that it was the last episode in the mixing process, and it was. We still, however, have one really important process that we need to go through, and that's mastering. So at the end of the last episode, I had a pretty rough mix down, and as I said a couple of times, it's not a finished product. Yours will be more detailed, they'll have had more input into it, and it will be hopefully a better quality product. This one is just an example. I've not done all of the process that I normally do. Yours will be better than this one. Don't just copy everything that I have done absolutely word for word. That is not what the purposes of this tutorials are. That is not what the purpose of this tutorial is. There we go, English. So, mastering. Mastering is about taking the mix down that we have in front of us and creating a really, really professional sounding, high level end product. And there are a couple of things that we need to do, a couple of things that we need to check in order for the mastering process to be full and complete. And you have a second task in this assignment asking you to master the track that you have mixed. So, what is mastering? Well, it's important to know, first of all, that mastering is not done on a multi-track recording like this. Okay, this is the mixdown. We do not want to master the file in its current form. We need to bounce it down to a stereo audio file. So we're going to do that first. Now, I've already activated the cycle tool over the top of the entire recording project. You should do that when you are going to bounce. Logic by default will automatically bounce whatever is within the cycle. If you don't put the cycle tool on, there's a good chance you'll get additional silence at the end of your mixdown, and you don't want that. So now that I've done that, I'm going to select Command B for bounce. Okay, we're looking to turn this into a single audio file. Now, you have various different options in front of you as to how you're going to burn it. Okay, the main two options that I use are either PCM, which is full quality files, or MP3, which is files which are going to be suitable for compression. If you need to send files over distance or share them with other people, for example, I would normally go for MP3. But if we're looking for full quality files, we're going to go for PCM. Okay, file format, my preferred one is WAV. However, your assignment brief does say that AIFF is acceptable. Okay, everything else can stay exactly the same. The resolution, the sample rate, unless it says differently on your assignment brief, and I don't believe it does in this case. 44 kilohertz is the standard sampling rate, 44.1. So let's go with that. So as soon as I hit OK, it's going to ask me where I want to save it. So I'm going to call this Alison Tutorial Mixdown. And I'm going to bounce it. So that's taking all of the instructions that we've created, all of the buses, all of the automation, and is creating an audio file of that. That will have appeared on my desktop, and here it is.
Listen close and don't be stuck.
Sounding quite nice, although, as I've said, not at all a finished project. So we're actually going to need a new Logic file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the mix, close that down, and I'm going to create a new file. File new, audio, and I'm going to drag in the WAV file. Yes to import, yes to import. Okay, and what we have here is a stereo audio file, hence the two traces. And this is what we are going to master. So we've bounced it down so far. And the next step is quality control. You have to remember that often in the industry at this point, you would be passing the file from one person to another. The mix engineer and the mastering engineer are going to be different people. And it's actually a good reason for that. And that's that two sets of ears are better than one. Okay, that is one of the main reasons why mastering engineers and mixing engineers are different people. Often, as a mixing engineer, you can get so involved in the mix that you get what's known as ear blindness, and you stop listening for things, or you don't pick up on things that you could. So it's good to have a second set of ears. Now, you're going to master your own recording, so you don't have the benefit of the second set of ears, but you can still do a quality control check. And if I look through this mix down, straight away, I can see a couple of things that I don't like. Okay, look here, this peak at the start, that doesn't look great to me. This peak here as well, okay, that doesn't look great to me either. And these ones over here, okay, they are pretty loud, pretty excessive in terms of. Now, we already know about this first peak here. This is that very hard snare drum strike. Okay, you can hear it. You can hear that the level suddenly jumps up there. Now, there are two things there. One, that means that the mix down at that point probably isn't up to scratch. But also, it means that we're going to have to reduce the overall volume of the rest of the recording in order to make sure that these peaks all meet the specification that we've been asked to mix to, which I'll talk more about later, which is but is a very specific window. You are asked to mix down between 0 and minus 0.2 in terms of an overall peak level. So that's going to affect everything else. So what we're actually going to do at this point is we're going to go back and we're going to fix any of those big issues. Now, actually, I'm only going to do one of them. Okay, I'm going to do the start, which is the main one, and I'm going to leave these. But I would recommend that when you're doing your mastering process, you actually reject what you see coming out first time if you have peaks like this, and you redo them in the mix down. Okay, and we're not going to fix those in the master. We can't. Right, we only have a stereo file. So I'm actually going to abandon this at this stage. So don't save. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of that particular mix down as well. Now, I've already noted where that particular problem is. I know where it is, but you will need to make some notes on your mix down going, well, it was at 42 seconds, or it was at bar 6, or whatever it may be. Okay, so I know that the problem is in the snare track. So I'm going to go to the snare track. Okay, and you can hear, here it is. Okay, and you can see that the level which is peaking the worst, or the level which is going highest, is the snare track. So what are we going to do? I'm going to re-automate that track. Here we go. Let's zoom in a bit. Okay, there's our peak that we want to reduce significantly. Okay, so the volume control is selected. Okay, so I'm going to add 3 automation points, and I'm going to briefly do that. Let's see what that looks like without the automation. Let's use the mixer to show us the level. Okay, it looks much, much better to me. Okay, now as I've said, in your version, you would go through, you would check for all of those peaks, and you would reject anything which you don't feel is up to standard. But for the moment, I'm going to remix down, or bounce down, I should say, going with PCM again. I'm going to call it mix down. This is all part of the mastering process. This is all necessary and normal. Okay, so we should have mix down on our desktop. Yes, we do. Now, thinking about it, what I probably should have done actually is I probably should have taken a screenshot of that first mix down. Of that first mastering project, so that I could say what I was about to fix and go back and do. And now if I'm being detailed about this, I probably should actually do that. I've lost my tutorial. There it is. So, you know what? Let's do it. Okay, so I'm bouncing the bad version again on purpose. called it something different, called it Mixdown A. And actually, to make sure that I get the right bounce, I'm going to do it again. Three automation points. There we go. So save the tutorial. No, because I haven't bounced it. Honestly, Mr. SC, get your act together. Must be too early in the morning. So I'm going to call this Mixdown B. Didn't have the cycle on for that one. Oh no, did have the cycle on for that one. That's okay. So we've got Mixdown A and Mixdown B. So let's open Mixdown A in a new file. Actually, I think Mixdown B was the dodgy one, wasn't it? Yes. I said dodgy. Less than ideal. No, Mixdown B, I fixed it. Mixdown A was the one where I hadn't fixed it. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to take a screenshot of that. And then get rid of it. I'm going to write it up. Duplicate. To begin the mastering process, I bounced the mix that I had been working on. Detail. I bounced it as a WAV file or WAV file, and then imported it back into Logic to master the track. Straight away, I could see that not all was okay with the mix that I had created. There were a number of peaks that were excessive, and so I have more work to do with the mix before I'm ready to master. Okay, so new project. Forgotten which one's which. B was the good one, is that right? Yes, there we go. Okay, so you can see, at the beginning at least, our peak issue, not such an issue anymore. Interestingly, louder on one side than the other. That must be a panning issue. Okay, still got a couple of peaks now. This one I'm not so worried about, but I probably would go back and would have a look at this and say, you know, why Why is this so much more than all of the others? We've got a couple of here as well. Now, these are choruses, I would assume. I haven't checked them out in detail in the same way, but you should. Okay, there's our mix down. Okay, so let's take a screenshot of that at this stage, because we've established that the peak issue is better anyway. This second version is much better. I have removed some of the heavy drum strikes. Give a much more balanced recording. No, much more even trace on the recording. This will mean I can generally level the track higher without having dangerous peaks in volume. There we go. So, what next? Well, if you listen to the end, there is a natural fade out. Okay, and if you were sending this out, if you were billing this on your album as a live recording, then you may very well want it like that. However, I think we'll put a proper fade out in it. Make it sound more pro. So we need to identify the point where we want our fade out to be. Okay, now I want our fade out to start well before the natural fade out happens. So I'm going to activate automation. I'm going to zoom in. So I'm going to go about here, I think. And I'm going to do it over the course of about 5 seconds. So about 3 minutes. So let's go 303. I'm going to automate that down to 0. Now you could do this in the mix down. You could put the fade in, absolutely you could. You could use master tracks or global tracks. You should avoid automating every track down, which is how you might have done it if you did it in year 11. Let's have a listen to this. Nice. Might actually be a bit sudden. Might need to go longer than 5 seconds. Or might make it just a shade earlier. Lovely job. Okay, so there we go. That will do nicely. Again, as I say, spend more time on it than me. Put more detail into it, put more effort into it. There we go. So what's next? Well, your assignment brief says that there should be noticeable improvements from the master, from the mix down to the master. Okay, so your master should sound even better than your high quality mix. Okay, I'll say that again. Your master should sound even better than your high quality mix. So there are a number of tools that can help you with this. Okay, there are actually specific mastering EQs built into Logic, and of course you can tweak them as well, as you've already been shown how to adjust EQ. So I'm going to open the mixer. Okay, now you can add any effects that you want to the master. You might decide that you want additional reverb. You might decide that you want additional compression. If you've got real differences between your louds and your quiets, for example, you might compress the entire mix. But what I'm definitely going to do is add EQ. So if you go down here, you've got mastering, right? And you've got a couple of different options, various different genres. You've got pop and rock. Now, Alison probably falls somewhere in between these two, but I'm going to use the pop one because the pop one generally mutes quite a lot of frequencies. It pulls things down, and that's what I'm going to go with at this stage. Rock is a bit less subtle.
Listen close and don't be stopped.
Now you might decide that you want to play around and maybe add some bass filter cutoff, that kind of thing. So let's have a look. Interesting. There's no very low end on this preset. There we go. Let's add some. So I've just added some roll off. Now you might decide that you want that to be there we go. Just decided to take a little bit of the thud off the kick drum. Okay, so used a roll-off filter in order to do that. And of course, what do we need to do when we make any changes? We take a screenshot. Oh, I've just realised I didn't screenshot the fade out either. Let's do that. I do understand why people don't do it as they go along. It is so easy to forget. So easy to get, but it's a habit that you really, really need to get into. And apparently, so do I. So let's do the second one first. So where's the automation? There it is. What is this screenshot? 20. There was, whoops, a natural fade out. Really can't type today, apparently. I'm doing this the day after I finish the rest of the episodes, and apparently my brain has stopped working. There was a natural fade out, should be hyphenated, at the end of our track. But as part of the mastering process, I decided to add a more professional sounding fade. I did this using volume automation to reduce the overall volume of the mix down over the course of around 7 seconds at the end of the song. Screenshot 21. Here I am adding processing to the mix down to create a final master. Started with the mastering preset for EQ called Pop, and then tweaked the settings to improve the overall quality. In particular, be specific, I added a bass filter to reduce some of the boominess on the kick drum. Okay, now you would do more. You would go into more detail. You would do more things. Okay, you can add additional processing. Don't go crazy, right? At the end of the day, if you haven't done a good mix down, you're not going to be able to fix it in the master. But you can make definite improvements still in the mastering process. You really can. And this is another example where it's really important to listen on different systems. Maybe get other people involved in the listening process. You can ask me as and when you get to your master. I might say, not particularly sure about that bit, or other people might say that sticks out of the mix for me a little bit. Okay, now it may be that you can fix it in the master. It may be that you have to go back to the mix down. That is absolutely fine. Okay, there will be plenty of occasions in the industry when a mastering engineer will send back a file to the mixing engineer and say, I don't like this, or this doesn't work, or this needs changing, and will ask for it to be remixed before it comes back to them for a final master. That is part of the process, so we should try and replicate that process as much as we possibly can in our process. Just one more time, you would do more than a single screenshot on your EQ. Okay, you would need more than that. But for the sake of our work right now and demonstrating, I'm carrying on to the last stage, which is the final leveling and bouncing to what is specified in your assignment brief. Okay, so you will always be given, I say always, you will pretty much always be given a specification that you need to work to when you are creating any kind of recording project. And the specification that we are given on your assignment brief is to bounce between 0 and minus 0.2. Okay, now here's my thing. I do not want you to bounce at 0, right? I do not want you to bounce at 0. Bouncing at 0 is dangerous. Okay, so I would like you to aim for minus 0.1 or minus 0.2. And let me show you how that works. So the fader that we are interested in this stage is the stereo outs. Okay, and in particular, we're looking at the peak meter. It's the peak output that we need to make sure that is between 0 and minus 0.2. So you're aiming for minus 0.1 or minus 0.2, and it is very, very specific. You're going to need to make some adjustments in order to achieve that. So where is the peak, right? You can see from the trace that the peak is roughly in that first chorus. This is very close. It's worth checking these, but this is the main peak. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cycle on over that section.
There's nothing here but that's all. There's nothing here but that's all.
Okay, now you can see that that is peaking at 2.9. It is, sorry, minus 2.9. It is really important that you do this after you have applied everything in terms of remixing, applying effects to the master, all of that kind of thing. It has to happen very, very last. But we have scope to turn everything up. As it stands, our track would be quieter than everything else on the radio station that it was being played alongside, and that is not good practice. This is another reason why we smooth out those peaks, why we got rid of that peak at the beginning, for example, because it would have meant that we would have had to level the entire track quieter. So, the stereo out fader is the one we want to adjust, because that is the final output. So we're looking for it to read minus 0.1. Okay, gone too far.
There's nothing here but that's all. There's nothing here.
Still too far.
That's all. There's nothing here.
Still too far.
That's all. There's nothing here but that's all.
Let's reset the peak meter.
There's nothing here.
Ah, okay, it wasn't resetting before. So I've gone to minus 0.6. Let's click on it to reset it.
There's nothing here.
0.5.
There's nothing.
Aha, bingo.
That's all. There's nothing here but that's all.
Okay, now at this point, it would be worth checking the entire track. Now, what I would do normally is I would just leave the entire track running to check out the peaks. Okay, I can't do that at this stage because I'm on a demonstration video. We've already checked our main peak. There it is at minus 0.2 again. Let's check it later. Oh, look. Deary me, 1.1. So actually these peaks are louder than that one. So these are the ones that we should have checked out. So always worth checking the song. The visual representation side of things on Logic is not always as precise as it could be. Okay, so we're currently mixed to 1.1 plus 1.1. So we've got clipping in our mix, which we definitely don't want. So let's come back to here. Okay, so minus 1.6. What was this one? Interesting, isn't it? That peak looks bigger than that one. And it must be when the stereo channels combine, we actually end up with a bit more. It's because of our panning that we've got. So here is where we're going to actually look to make the changes. 1.6. Whoa, gosh. There we go. We're at minus 0.2. Okay, I'm just going to check that other spot. Minus 1, that'll do nicely. There we go. So at the end of the full song run through, your fader should be sitting either at minus 0.2 or minus 0.1. Please don't mix to 0. Okay, it's not good practice. Okay, even though that is what BTEC is asking for. Now, in reality, I say this again, I would have gone back and in the mix, I would have fixed some of these peaks. Okay, because you can see that we're having to level quite a lot of our stuff lower than we otherwise would if we didn't have this very loud section, this very loud section, and this very loud section. I would look again in the mix down, not in the master, as to why those are the way that they are. But once you have done that, you can then bounce your final mix, and you should, please, for your final mix, no, for your final master, muddling up my M words, is produce a WAV file. Okay, and we're going to call that Allison Master. And there is the process finished. And you now end up with a finished project. Hooray, we're finally done. But we're not done because we haven't written up that final section. So here we go. Duplicate. Too many screenshots on my desktop. Screenshot 22. Oh, look at that. We happen to finish on my lucky number. Okay, number 22. So I then needed to bounce the master down to between 0 and minus 0.2 dB. I prefer to bounce to minus 0.2. And so I checked the peak level on the stereo out fader to make sure that it was within specified parameters. checked the entire song and had to make some additional adjustments as the levels towards the end of the song were higher than expected. And I had to reduce the overall level. There we go. Okay, so here is our Allison master wave file. And there's mastering. So mastering is very different from mixing. It is the final, last stage of quality control and checking that everything is as it should be. And the phrase which is used often by mastering engineers is making it radio ready in terms of levels and quality. So there we go. That is everything that you need to do for this assignment within Unit 13.